All right, welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're going to be talking about something super interesting, a potential link between the ketogenic diet and hormone replacement therapy, or HRT, in trans women.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at an article by a trans woman, Jaime Hoerricks, and her experience on HRT has been
Interesting.
pretty fascinating, right? I mean, she saw changes within weeks, not the months or years that most trans women expect.
Yeah, that's definitely not typical.
Not typical at all. And what's even more intriguing, she thinks her long-term keto diet could be a big factor.
Yeah, that's definitely something to think about because it really challenges what we think we know about HRT and how long it's supposed to take.
It does. And the thing is, Jamie wasn't following the keto diet for weight loss, which is, the reason a lot of people do it.
Right.
She had been on a pretty strict keto diet for years to manage histamine intolerance
Oh, wow.
and to keep inflammation down. So how does a diet focused on managing those things possibly end up like supercharging her HRT results?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? To really unpack that, we need to look at a few things.
Okay.
First, how HRT typically works. So you're basically introducing estrogen into the body to start, the feminization process. And doctors usually give a general timeline, but it's usually understood that it's a gradual thing.
Right.
Subtle changes over months, and then more noticeable effects taking years to fully show up.
And that's something you see backed up by a lot of anecdotal evidence in like online communities, right? Like a lot of trans women express frustration with how slow the changes seem to be.
Absolutely. And, it makes sense that they'd feel that way. So Shami's experience of these huge shifts happening in just weeks, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so let's talk about this keto diet.
Okay.
It's not just any keto diet. Shami describes it as stricter than usual. So we're talking about drastically cutting carbs and upping the fat intake.
Right. So basically pushing the body to switch from using glucose as its main energy source to using fat instead.
Right. And that leads to the production of ketone bodies.
Exactly. Which then become the body's new fuel.
Okay, so we've got HRT introducing estrogen into the system, and we've got the keto diet totally changing how the body makes energy. So how does Jamie actually connect those two things?
Well, her thinking is that years of being in ketosis, which is that state where your body's running on ketones, might have basically optimized her body's response to HRT.
So it's not just about estrogen being there, it's about how well the body can actually use it.
Exactly. That's a key
Oh,
point.
I see.
And Jamie talks about a few potential mechanisms that might be at work here.
Okay.
One is enhanced estrogen bioavailability.
And remind me what that means again?
Sure. It essentially means more of the estrogen she's taking is actually getting to where it needs to go in the body and having a stronger effect.
Got it.
And she thinks keto is involved here because of how it affects lipid metabolism, which is how our bodies process fats.
Okay, right, because estrogen relies on these proteins to travel in the blood.
Exactly. Proteins like SHBG and albumin. And keto, because it focuses on good fats and minimizing inflammation, might be making that whole transport system work better so the estrogen is more available to the entire body.
Interesting. So it's like keto prepped the way for the estrogen to be delivered more efficiently.
That's a great way to think about it.
Okay, so what's the other mechanism?
The second one is reduced inflammation.
Okay.
So we know that chronic inflammation can mess with how sensitive hormone receptors are,
Right.
meaning that even if estrogen is present, it might not be able to actually bind to those receptors effectively if there's too much inflammation going on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And ketone bodies, specifically beta-hydroxybutyrate, have these anti-inflammatory properties.
I see.
So they could be playing a part in making a more receptive environment for the estrogen to actually do what it needs to do.
Ah. So it's not just about getting the estrogen there, but making sure the cells are ready to actually take it in.
You got it.
I'm curious about how her stricter than usual keto diet plays into all of this.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's something I think we need to look into more. What exactly makes it so strict? Is it the types of fat she's eating, the level of carb restriction? Could those things be amplifying the effects we're talking about? It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
And on top of that, Jamie uses this really interesting analogy to try to explain her experience.
Okay, lay it on me.
She compares it to pregnancy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
She talks about how during pregnancy, you have a well-nourished body going through all these massive, rapid transformations.
Yeah.
It's all fueled by good nutrition and enough calories to support all that growth.
So is she suggesting that years of this keto diet, which really emphasizes metabolic health and hormone balance, have kind of prepared her body to embrace these changes from HRT in a similar way?
I think that's the implication, yeah. And it raises some really fascinating questions like, how much does our current metabolic state really affect how our bodies are able to change? Could certain diets, like keto, create an environment that's more responsive to hormonal shifts, whether it's HRT or just natural hormonal changes?
It's almost like she's saying we've been so focused on the hormones themselves that we've overlooked the environment those hormones are working in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is what brings us to a really important point. For all the buzz keto gets for weight loss and other health benefits, there's practically no research on how it interacts with HRT, especially for trans women.
And that's a problem because it means trans women are basically left with this generic eat healthy advice, which, as Jane points out, is pretty vague
Right.
and might not be helpful for everyone.
It's like telling someone to go on a journey without giving them a map or any direction.
Exactly. It's like, good luck, figure it out. So it begs the question, could the typical Western diet, with all of its processed food and refined carbs, actually be working against HRT for a lot of trans women?
Yeah, it's a question worth exploring for sure.
Definitely something to consider.
We know that the Western diet is linked to chronic inflammation, but it also often leads to people not getting enough calories and having unhealthy levels of fats in their blood.
And all of those things could be working against the changes HRT is supposed to bring about.
Exactly. It's not just about taking the hormones. It's about creating an environment in the body where those hormones can actually do their thing.
It's like setting the stage for the transformation.
I like that analogy. And Jamie's experience, whether it's directly because of keto or not, really emphasizes this crucial point. Diet might play a much bigger role in HRT outcomes than we've realized.
Yeah, it definitely highlights the need for more research, specifically looking at how different diets affect HRT in trans women.
I totally agree. We need to move beyond these general recommendations and start getting some solid evidence so we can give people advice that's tailored to their individual needs.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll dig deeper into those potential implications. We were talking about Jamie's experience and how it points to this possible connection between the ketogenic diet and how effective HRT is. But what really stood out to me was the lack of research in this area.
Yeah.
It leaves trans women with this very general advice when it comes to diet and HRT.
It's a huge gap, for sure. We talk about how trans women are often told to eat healthy,
Yeah.
but that's so broad.
Right. It's almost uselessly broad.
It is. It's like telling someone struggling with depression to just be happy.
Exactly. So James' story makes you wonder, could the typical Western diet, which a lot of people think of as healthy,
Right.
actually be working against HRT? We talked about inflammation, but what other things about the Western diet might be getting in the way?
One big issue is this focus on restricting calories.
Okay.
So many people, and trans women are no exception, are constantly told they need to be thin.
Yeah.
And that leads to a lot of dieting and not eating enough.
So what does that do to HRT?
Well, when your body isn't getting enough calories, it goes into survival mode.
Okay.
The essential functions take priority, and things like hormonal changes kind of get put on hold.
So it's like saying, look, I'm just trying to keep the lights on here.
Right.
I can't afford to renovate the whole house right now.
Exactly. So even if someone is taking hormones,
Mm-hmm.
if their body is constantly in this survival mode because they're not eating enough, those hormones might not be used as effectively.
Makes sense. And then there's the whole thing about lipid profiles, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We talked about how healthy fats are important for getting those hormones where they need to go.
Right. And the Western diet is often so focused on low-fat everything
Yeah.
that people might not be getting the right types of fats to make sure that estrogen is actually available to the body.
So you could be doing everything right, taking your estrogen, but if your body doesn't have what it needs to actually transport it efficiently,
Yeah.
it's not going to do much.
Yeah, it's like having a fancy sports car with no gas. All that potential, but nowhere to go.
I love that analogy. So this really highlights how important it is to think about the bigger picture of metabolic health
I think so.
and not just focus on the hormones themselves.
100%. HRT isn't just about taking a pill. It's about creating an environment inside your body where those hormones can actually work their magic.
Right.
That's where having personalized advice is so crucial.
So instead of just saying, eat healthy, healthcare providers should be working with trans women to understand their individual needs
Yeah.
and come up with a diet plan that actually helps them reach their HRT goals.
Absolutely. Imagine going to the doctor and getting specific advice tailored to your situation, your health history, your goals. That would be so much more helpful.
It would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
Empowering, even.
it would. But right now, we're basically stuck with anecdotal evidence and people experimenting on their own.
Like Jamie.
Exactly. And that can be really frustrating and even risky sometimes.
For sure. It really underscores how much we need research, specifically on how different diets affect HRT outcomes for trans women.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
What specific areas do you think need to be addressed? Like, what kind of studies would actually give us the information we need?
Well, for starters, I think we need studies comparing the effects of different diets on HRT outcomes.
Okay.
Like, how does keto stack up against something like the Mediterranean diet or even the standard Western diet in terms of hormone levels, how well symptoms are managed, overall well-being, those kinds of things.
I think that's a great starting point.
And it's so important that these studies include diverse groups of trans women.
100%. We need to look at age, race, ethnicity, all those factors that can influence how people eat and their overall health.
Absolutely. We haven't really touched on the ethical side of this research gap, but it's a pretty big deal, right?
Huge. I mean, the lack of research puts trans women in a really tough spot, having to make decisions based on very limited information.
Right. They have to rely on anecdotes or whatever they can find online.
Exactly. And that can lead to a lot of anxiety, uncertainty, even feeling like the medical community isn't taking them seriously.
Yeah.
And it also raises questions about informed consent.
How so?
Well, if trans women aren't fully informed about how diet can potentially affect their HRT, can they really make informed decisions about their health care?
It's like trying to navigate through a dark maze.
I like that.
You might eventually figure it out, but it's so much harder and more stressful without a map.
A good analogy.
So it's about recognizing that healthcare is a partnership.
Yeah.
And that partnership should be built on trust, honesty, and evidence-based information.
Couldn't agree more.
Jamie's experience is valuable, but it's only one piece of the puzzle.
Right. It's just one story.
It's a starting point for a much larger discussion about diet, HRT, and the unique needs of the trans community.
And how all of those things intersect.
It's about moving away from generalizations and embracing the fact that everyone's biology is different.
Yeah.
What works for one person might not work for another. But James' story isn't just about HRT.
That's true.
It makes you think about the role of diet in hormonal health for everyone.
Sure. It's something we all need to think about more.
It really is. Welcome back. We've been talking about James' experience and how she thinks her keto diet might have sped up her transition. But beyond HRT for trans women, her story makes you think about how diet affects hormonal health for everyone, right?
It really does. It's like she's pointed a flashlight on something we haven't paid enough attention to.
Right.
Hormones are so crucial for our health.
They affect everything.
They really do. Mood, energy, sleep, reproductive function, everything.
And if making changes to our diets could actually improve those areas, it would be huge for preventative health care and just, feeling good overall.
It would be massive.
Yeah.
It totally shifts the focus from just reacting to problems to being proactive about our health.
So it makes you wonder, have we been underestimating how much diet can affect our hormone balance?
I think it's definitely possible. We talked about the problems with the Western diet, but what about diets that could actually support hormonal health? Where do we even start with that?
Right. It can feel overwhelming.
It can.
Yeah.
And that's where this idea of personalized nutrition comes in.
Okay.
It's understanding that there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
What's perfect for one person might be totally wrong for someone else.
So how do we figure out what's best for us individually?
Well, it starts with understanding our individual needs, our genes, our lifestyles. And that's where this really exciting field of nutrigenomics comes in.
Nutrigenomics.
Yeah. Remind me, what is that again?
Okay, refresh my memory.
It looks at how our genes and the food we eat interact with each other.
Right.
It's like, how do our individual genetic differences affect how we respond to different nutrients and diets?
So, like, some people might process certain fats better because of their genes, and others might be more likely to get inflammation from certain carbs.
Exactly. And knowing that kind of stuff can help us make better choices about what we're eating.
Makes sense.
It's about moving away from that generic advice and embracing a personalized approach.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that our genes are unique.
I like that.
It's not just about avoiding disease. It's about optimizing our health throughout our lives.
So we need to stop thinking of food as just fuel and start seeing it as information that interacts with our genes.
That's a great way to think about it.
And it can make a huge difference in our health.
It really can. And, Jaime's experience, even though it's about her being a trans woman, I think it has the potential to get more people thinking about how diet affects hormonal health in general.
Yeah, it makes you question your assumptions
It
and
does.
look at things in a new way.
It reminds us that we're not just stuck with whatever genes we're born with.
Right, right.
We have the power to change things through the choices we make, especially what we eat.
That's powerful stuff. But knowing where to start can be overwhelming.
It can be.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to listeners who want to explore this more?
Well, first and foremost, talk to your doctor. They can help you figure out what your individual needs are and make sure that any changes you make to your diet are safe.
Good advice.
And don't be afraid to speak up. If you're not getting the answers you need, keep asking questions, keep pushing.
I agree.
Knowledge is power, and the more you know about your own body, the better decisions you can make.
Absolutely. And remember, this isn't about reaching some end goal.
It's a journey.
It is.
Yeah.
Experiment, pay attention to how your body feels, and keep learning.
Yeah.
There are so many resources out there, like dietitians who specialize in hormonal health.
Right.
They can help you along the way.
So as we wrap up, what's the one big thing you want listeners to walk away with?
Our bodies are amazing. They can change and adapt. We have more power than we think.
Yeah.
And when we focus on things like our diet, inflammation, our metabolic health, we can really unlock our full potential.
It's all about understanding that our health is this dynamic mix of our genes, our environment, and the choices we make every day.
Beautifully said.
And Shami's story reminds us that sometimes the most important discoveries come from the most unexpected places.
It's true.
It challenges us to rethink everything we thought we knew
I like that.
and opens up a world of possibilities. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you learned something new and that you're feeling inspired to learn more about personalized nutrition and how it can transform your health. We'll see you next time.